All right, welcome to this week's episode of Talkin Folk. We've got a special guest on today's episode, Dillon Warnek. He sat down with me today to talk about his debut album, Now That It's All Over. Just came out a couple months ago. It's a great album. I love it. We talked about a bunch of songs. We talked about some influences. We made fun of his Spotify bio, which you're going to have to listen to or check it out on his Spotify page. A little bit about Dillon before we get into the show. He's been in the music industry for quite some time. He's found his way to Nashville. He's going to tell a little bit of his own story, but was the guitarist for Courtney Marie Andrews, and now he's gone solo to put work under his own name. And on this debut album, Margot Price is on the title track, and also her band is the backing band through the whole album. So sounds great, lyrics are great. He's awesome. Hope you like the show. I'm going to kick it off here with Titanic Thompson, which is a killer tune off Now That It's All Over. Enjoy.
And don't go thinking it was just tricks that would earn the man his pay. You can find him on the golf course, and he can flat out play. It'd be down in Dallas, all the old timers would tell. He'd be wagering the oil man, and he'd be winning oil wells.
All right, welcome to this week's episode of Talkin Folk. This is Nick, and I'm here with Dillon Warnek. What's going on, Dillon? Thanks for coming on the show.
And thank you for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. Obviously, your music and the album that you put out a couple months ago at this point. But why don't you give us a little bit of a rundown? Because I'll be honest with you. I started going through your Spotify bio, and I don't know if that thing's supposed to be like a puzzle or what. I may on the show actually have to put up like a little image of it, but I know you're down in Nashville right now, but tell us a little bit about yourself, the album that just came out, which is Now That It's All Over, and give us a little rundown on Dillon.
Well, to start that bio, I've just written a new bio. I don't know if you're supposed to admit that you're the one that writes it, but I can't handle when anybody else writes it. Right. And I just wrote a new one because that other bio, I didn't really know that bios had to be necessarily like, I thought they just had to tell the truth. I didn't know they needed to be truthful. And so I forgot about this bio that's been out there. And then every once in a while I'll get reminded of it and then horrified that it's still out there. And so there will be a new bio coming out, but I do.
So you're
stand
saying
by
I've got to save this bio before you change it, like you're with hands tequila calm and thoughts of divorce lawyers in his head, like save those lines.
I know. You know what? What am I thinking? I mean, I still. That's what's weird is line by line I stand by it. I don't know why maybe I feel a pressure to legitimize it or something, but the bio is a gift that keeps on getting, because I forget about it, and then somebody will send it to me and be like, dude, really enjoyed your bio, and I'm like, well, oh my god, well, what did you think of the music? You know what I mean?
Did you make it to the album or
yeah,
what?
did you get to the album, or did you call your nearest divorce lawyer or something?
Oh man,
I don't know.
So you released the album. When did that actually come out? That was in end of March or so, April?
Yeah, I think March 26th of this year, and it was all a big accident, really. I was kind of for years I'd been kind of playing for other musicians and bands, yep. and I think it's because I was kind of too scared probably to really put my own stuff like out there in a real attempt, and then finally, I mean, I was kind of burning out on it, and I had all of these songs. I had just moved to Nashville. I'd gotten off the road. I wasn't touring with anybody. And I just finally settled in Nashville, just got out of a long relationship. And there was kind of a real stripping away of all the things that you kind of hide behind, be it like, you know, like a long-term partner and like, you know, being on the road, that kind of itinerant life, you know, it's all like stolen waitresses' pens and like thoughts on napkins and stuff. And like, you don't have to, you're not confronted. And so there was sort of a real accounting of self, which sounds much more adult than what it was. It was really probably a year drunk and me just writing songs. And a good friend of mine was like, you know, we should really record those. And then the second we began recording, it was like that scene in Blues Brothers, you know, where the light, like, I've seen it. Can you see the light? I mean, it was like, this is what you got to do. I mean, this is you know, you're wondering, you know, what do you got? Like this is it. This is what you got to be doing. And since then, it's just been wild.
So these weren't songs that you, and I know that you were, you played with Courtney Marie Andrews for a long time, right? As a guitarist.
Yeah.
So were these songs that you were writing on the side as time was going on, or was it you made the decision you wanted to move to make your own, you know, your own work under your own name, so to speak, and then started writing, or was it maybe a combo?
I'd always written on the side. I think Titanic Thompson off of the record was something I had written a few years ago in New Mexico. And then Arkansas Waitress was a song I had written many, many years before. And those were the two so I'd always like written, but it was really like, it had began in earnest. Like I knew what it meant when I wrote a song, you know, versus, I don't know if I knew what that meant years prior. Like maybe I lucked out and I wrote a song better than my ability in the past. And those are the holdovers that I kept, but I wasn't aware that the reason I liked it is because that's what my own voice was or whatever. And it really was like a figuring out what it means when I put pen to page that really kicked it off, you know?
Yeah, no, I got you. That's, I mean, it's tough because, you know, we've spoken to artists who have played with other bands and then made the jump, right? And then they think, is this going to take? And you and I were messaging back and forth over the past week or so about coming on the show, and one of your reactions was, it's just weird that people are listening to my music, you know, under my name, you know, and obviously appreciative of anyone who does, but you know, I can imagine that's like, okay, now I'm just putting myself out there as an individual entity. It's probably a different feeling than playing with a band, you know, that you could be a part of.
Yeah, because it all, you know, goes back to that self-accounting. You know, when you're playing someone else's songs, especially, you know, you name someone like Courtney, who's such a fierce spirit. You know, your job isn't even to be a musician. Like your job is to be an emotional amplifier. Right. You know, of what someone else is feeling, and that's her. And so I think there was that going on for many years. And for me, it wasn't even taking the leap into my own stuff. I think it was like taking a stumble and falling and hitting every possible thing on the way down. And then I ended up just at the bottom of my psyche, and that's where all the characters for the songs were and stuff. And I was just like, oh, it's all you people. I've been putting you all off for a long time. How are you? Yeah. And they're like, well, not well. And I was like, well, let's write about it. You know.
Well, the thing came out pretty damn good, man. So we're happy you did it. So let's play the first part of the first single that came out, which is "Good Man." We'll talk about maybe we'll play about 30 seconds, and we'll talk about the song, because that is certainly, I don't know if you want to call it a character piece, but there's a lot going on in there. So here we go. Here's "Good Man," the first single off Now That It's All Over.
Well, if I die tonight, that's all right. The Lord says you're through. I got some final wishes for you, call my missus. There's a couple things I need you to do. Get all these ladies out of here. Clean up all these drinks. Prop my body in the kitchen. Make it look like I was fixing the sink. People think it's crazy, but my buddies all understand. Fix it up right and make it look just like I died a good man. And there's $27 in my wallet.
All right, so that's a little bit of Good Man. You're going to have to go listen to the rest yourself. Available on all the different streaming platforms. So that song, I mean, that's you just mentioned it. You had stories and you're stumbling down these, kind of rabbit holes of ideas and whatnot. That is like, do you have a personal experience? Obviously, you're still alive, but do you have a personal experience where you're like, hey, I need to clean up this house, and I've got, and maybe this is too personal, but I've got 5 different funerals for the 5 different women to show up to, because like that just made me laugh. I listened to that song and I'm like, this is funny. It's well written. There's a good story, and oh, by the way, the music behind it's really good. So how do you get to that point where you're writing something that's like so out of body that's you're putting yourself in a character perspective?
I think in that bio I'll be taken down. It's the rule number 1 of writing is write what you know, right? And I think I really drawn to unsympathetic characters painted sympathetically,
Yeah.
And then I think too that a lot of my spirit empathizes with characters and like Good Man and stuff, and it's almost like write it so you don't become it. It's like a one-step self-awareness thing. You know what I mean? Where being aware enough to have humor about something kind of keeps yourself in check too. And so it's almost like you're writing like the worst possible road you could go down, but you're doing it just because you're the one in charge of it, and you're exploring it in a way that's self-aware. And
so humor is not common though in songwriting, and if it is, it's usually not actually funny, which it's, you listen to different actors and who have done dramas versus comedies, and they'll all tell you comedy's the hardest to do, pull off kind of on screen. Is it the same way for writing music or performing music?
I think it's probably the narrowest of lines to walk, because what's the difference between humor and comedy? It's not like there's a fine line between having like a humorous take on a subject and then like an Adam Sandler song or something, which has its own place too, but now you've kind of jumped into a different thing, right? And I think at its roots, all of my writing probably draws on humor and elements of comedy more than anything, because it's all these explorations of tension and release, right? I mean, you have that at the basis of humor. It's this tension, release, fight or flight thing, and that is really stimulating as a writer to write. And sadness, I'm not going to say sadness is easy, because it's not to write. Like writing any emotion in itself is difficult. But my friend got cancer and is real sick. That's sad. Anybody that's not a sociopath can empathize. But if you can make that funny, and then bring it back around, and now you have like a rumination on. Now you've disarmed somebody, and now you can kind of get to layers of a person in a situation you wouldn't have before, just because like a blanket of empathy would have blocked everything.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have sad moments on the album. I don't want to just paint it like you're a comedy writer, in terms of.
No, everybody in that album is having a rough go. Like nobody's really doing too good on the record. Like every single character is kind of like, they're not doing so well.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, it's and what I like about it is you're giving a voice to a lot of different characters that you may not take the example in Good Man, right? Like here's a person who's died, or if they died, and they're down and out, they're in a rough situation, but make me look good for all the people around me. That's not a subject that really gets covered very often, right? So like, I was thinking as I listened to this, like, who are your influences, right? And the one to me, and take it for what it is. If you don't like his work, I'll kick you off the podcast. No, is John Prine. So like, what you're doing is in your own way a little bit of the type of thing that John Prine did, which was shine light on different characters that he wasn't, right, and also make it funny, and it has to sound good. It's like a really hard combo, and that's why so many people ended up loving John throughout his work. So was he one of your influences as you started writing and listening to music?
Yeah, big time. I mean, I don't know how you could even attempt to write a song without, being familiar with him. And he's a massive, massive influence for a lot of those reasons, you named. And just this, like, I mean, he'll have to, and it's a cliche. I mean, it's probably everybody describes him that way, but it's because it's so damn true. I mean, you'll have tears coming out of your eyes, and then he'll hit you with something, and you'll be laughing your ass off.
Right.
And you're not emotionally exhausted by the end of his songs. You're renewed,
Right.
And it's this real spirit to his work. Warren Zevon is another one that he finds characters and situations and places that it's like, how the hell did he think of that? Like, and I think those two are great examples, and other writers too, where, coming away from listening to a song, how did he think of that? Lucinda Williams is another one where I think she's probably her and Tom Petty are probably the greatest chorus writers of all time. And Lucinda is another one. Like, how the hell did she think of that? And I think it's just these like fiercely independent spirits and thinkers willing to go these places and find these characters or these songs versus, trying to write the same song as everybody, trying to find something that you feel like hasn't been said before. And whether I do it or not is irrelevant, but those people have, and that's, that's where I draw inspiration from. And, Tom Robbins, the writer of the single greatest line in English language, her eyes were like a fire in a Mexican nightclub. Like, Tom Robbins is a huge inspiration on me. I mean, that line right there, her eyes were like a fire in a Mexican nightclub. I mean, just stuff like that. I mean, it's just like, and Bob Dylan once wrote about the cracking, shaking, breaking sounds. And that's like what all these people were talking about. Like, those are the people.
Is this the kind of music that the kind of music you're writing now, what we're talking about here, is this what you listened to growing up, or was this a learned genre for you? I mean, the reason I ask is, a lot of people that I've spoken to who love this kind of music, folk music, if you will, put it in that kind of general bucket, they listen to a lot of different stuff. They listen to jazz, they listen to, different international music. They may have listened to hardcore, punk, different things. What's kind of like behind you now at this point, maybe, but that you listened to growing up?
Man, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know that I've grown up yet. I mean, it's all the same stuff. My parents were, big Grateful Dead fans, and I grew up and it was like Uncle Jerry. And so there was my intro to all the folk. So, he's a folk historian. And so, him singing, I've been all around this world. I mean, it's some of my earliest memories, and like, so not that my parents weren't musicians or anything. They were just lovers of music.
So what made you pick up a guitar? Just your love for music on your own?
What was I doing? I had gotten into Bob Dylan at that point. It was actually Bob Dylan's first CD too, which is the weirdest Bob Dylan CD to get into when you're 14 years old. It's just him doing all the folk songs. And I remember hating it at first, but out of sheer procrastination, I never took it out of the time it was a portable CD player, and I was listening, and finally he was singing House of the Rising Sun, and it was the part where he sings like, tell my baby sister, where he sings, tell my baby sister not to do what I've done, and it all clicked. And that probably to this day, like any line you write, and he obviously didn't write that song, he took the arrangement from Dave Van Ronk, but that feeling, tell my baby sister not to do what I've done, what a perfect line, what a perfect reason to raise your voice, what a genius time in the song to hammer your point home.
Right.
And at 14, not knowing all this stuff yet, but like feeling that, like what's happening, like a point is being hammered to you, and that's a character, that's a woman in a whorehouse. Tell my baby sister not to do what I've done. And then, that's my first instance of a line really rocking my world. And then, that threw me down a Bob Dylan rabbit hole. And then he sang, they'll stone you when you're playing your guitar. And I was like, shit, if that's going to happen, I need a guitar. And so started playing guitar.
The cool thing about Dylan too, and not to make this a Bob Dylan podcast all of a sudden, but
they all are. I mean, any songwriter, like it's a Bob Dylan podcast.
Was that early stuff. I'm sure when you were listening to it, it doesn't grab you because of the guitar playing or any of the musical arrangement. But then when you start to really listen to it again and again, and you hear the lyrics, and when, like you're saying, when he raises his voice, it might be the only time for 3 tracks that he raises his voice. And all of a sudden, he draws emphasis on it. Or there is one part where he plays the guitar a little, because most of that is all acoustic, like plays it a little harder so that he emphasizes something musically, right? Like those are the kind of things that you don't pick up on just listening to Bob Dylan once on the radio, right? You had to be lucky enough or lazy enough, as you said, to not change the CD in your CD player to really kind of capture that.
Exactly. And like everything in my life can be attributed to blind luck and my sheer stupidity, you know what I mean? And like it's this, from this record to everything else, and I don't know what would have happened where, because I had a long bus ride to school. It was like a 30-40 minute bus ride. We lived out in the sticks. And I would just listen to the CD's only like 37 minutes long too. I remember that. So I'd listen to the CD every day on the way to school and every day home. And it finally clicked. And it's probably the worst thing that ever happened to me. But that's what set me off on everything. And it was just this instant familiarity. I'm not going to wax poetic about, I think every kid feels out of place. And, I remember kids like caring about like college basketball, and I was like, why the hell would you even care about what college? You don't even go to that college. Right. It's like, and I just never understood that stuff. And but then I'd like tell my baby sister not to do what I've done, and that caught my ear, and that was something whether I knew it at the time or not, I knew it. And then here we are now, and it blows my mind that we're talking about my stuff now, like it's
So
strange
I want to talk
world.
about, I do have a personal favorite on this album, which is now that it's all over, which is As Soon As They Let Me Out of Jail. So let's play a minute of that, and then we'll talk a little bit about it if you don't mind.
Yeah.
The food here isn't too bad. Folks just like to complain. Me, I mostly keep my head down, try and pass the time away. And I still see all the angles. These days I just let them go. I might have finally learned my lesson. Maybe I'm just getting old. Tell Dad I ain't angry. They didn't pay my bail. Oh, Mama, I can't wait to show you how I've changed since they let me out of jail.
All right, so that's a little bit of As Soon As They Let Me Out of Jail. That is my favorite song. I think the thing that hits me right away, Dylan, is would you even call it a ragtime type piano? I mean, somewhere in that type of influence.
Yeah, somewhere down in New Orleans, I think. That'd be something they sang past closing time in New Orleans or something.
Yeah.
They'd sing something better, but that's my take on something like that.
Well, I mean, hey, look, I like it, so what you got one fan at least.
That's one
so
more
you marry that sound, right? So the story is another character, unless you actually wrote that from jail. But I don't think you did. So you've got that story there about becoming a better man when you get out of jail and all these different things. But you marry this kind of sad tone in the lyrics, if you will, to that upbeat piano ragtime bar sound. I mean, there's a lot going on there. Tell me about like how that song came together, the band, like anything that you can is just ear candy for me.
Well, starting with the song, I'll try and keep it brief. I've known a lot of friends get hooked on drugs and then they'll get clean, and I know people that get out of relationships, and I myself included. And the relentless optimism of somebody who's just been shattered, and somebody trying to rebuild. And that's kind of what this character in this song is doing. And it's just like, I've had friends trying to kick drugs, and they'll be talking to you a mile a minute about how like, well, I'm going to do this, and hey man, I'm going to fly out there. I'm going to come visit you. Everything's good, man. I'm 2 days sober. And it's like, whoa, just, hey, no, just take it one day at a time. And,
right.
Same thing, people getting out of relationships, they're, I'm good now. I mean, yeah, we were married 8 years, but it's been a week. Like, I'm back on the saddle. And it's like, buddy, you okay? Like, let's just, come on, talk to me. And that's this character in the song. It's just writing his mother, and it's, I mean, everything he has to say, like, I get why dad didn't pay the bail. Oh God, I was so goddamn crazy, but I'm clean now. Well, when I think of everyone I ripped off, I feel bad, and it's like, oh, my buddy's going to get me this job. And it's like, Mom, I can't wait as soon as I get out of jail. And it's like, let's get out of jail first, And
right.
So like, it can be this emotional prison. It's like, why don't we get out of this place first, and then we can start making the plans. You know what I mean? And,
so some of those lines, have you heard those lines from, you don't need to throw any of your friends or anything under the bus who's been in and out of jail, but have you heard some of those lines or had some of those conversations with people? Because I did notice one of the things in your bio, going back to that, was that you would write based off experiences that other people had too. Like, if you heard somebody had a hard time with a relationship, or maybe your own personal relationship, whatever it was, but do you have a character in mind and you don't need to say it, but like how you wrote this song through a process?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's me. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of me in there, just looking back on certain things and like, so goddamn crazy. It's a wonder I ain't dead. I probably said those words, but then the character in the song gets the next line. When I think of everyone I ripped off, sometimes I wish I was instead. And, I mean, I've known that person too. I mean, I've known friends that, they get clean and they're just like, all the friends that have ever loaned them money, all the time they stole grandma's checkbook, all the things wash over them finally for the first time, and they're just horrified, and whatever the character in the song, I guess when Marie left me, everything went off the rail. You know what I mean? And it's
right.
Just sort of this whole combination of, having known people and my own experiences, and you kind of just create this person that's kind of, he's probably over promising at the moment. He's just sort of figuring it out, and it's like the real goal is get out of the place you're in. Nobody can bail you out. Your dad ain't bailing you out. Like, no one's coming. Like, you're in this place. You need to be there, and you'll get out when you're out, and then we'll start figuring it out.
Yeah.
And that's my advice to friends getting out of relationships, like friends trying to kick drugs, friends like who ate bad seafood. You know what I mean? It's all related.
Yeah. Well, especially the bad seafood one.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like you're in that place, man. Like once you get out of there, we'll get you out.
So part of that song, let's switch to the music side of it, because I think that's the beauty in it. Because let's just say you just heard this music, you heard this song in another room playing from another room, and you couldn't really hear the words. You'd think it was a really upbeat song, but it's a really, in this case for this character, introspective, look at this person. How did that come together? It was, you got the ragtime type piano. We haven't touched much on your backing band, but like this song sounds like a blast to actually record.
Well, it is, and because it's it comes from New Orleans music, and I'm a big fan of Dr. John and Professor Longhair and New Orleans standards, and that the intro and refrain of the tune is a very, very common New Orleans line, where I don't even know if you can hear my piano, but it's just it's this. Yep. And if it's not, you can just edit that out. Who knows? But it's that comes from that New Orleans swagger, and and New Orleans music will famously pair, junkies walking down the street with a bottle of wine with the most upbeat horn section you've ever heard, and so the music aspect of that song definitely comes from my love of New Orleans music, New Orleans standards. Not that I would in any way, shape, or form claim to be, any sort of true student of New Orleans music. They're too good down there, and they got too much their own thing going. But that's at least being inspired by it. And
yeah.
And luckily, when getting to the backing band, the backing band on my record was Margot Price's backing band, and
yep.
They can all do anything. And the keyboard player on that, piano player, Micah, that's actually, I live with him. Margot's piano player is Micah Holscher, and he's in the other room, I think, probably doing something genius on the piano. I don't know. But, and what's cool about that song is my records are all recorded mostly live, but that is the livest song of all of them. I was on guitar, and Micah was playing piano right here, and I'm playing live. He's playing live. Drums and bass are in the other room, and it's, not a lot of people record that way anymore. But
no,
we did it, and there's all sorts of bleed, and I love it. I love the sound of that. I love the sound of bleed. It took me, 30 years of my life and 16 of it making music, but what I love about records is the sound of instruments bleeding into each other. And my engineer, Drew Carroll, who co-produced this last record, and he's producing this next one at Bomb Shelter. Drew just dives head first into it, and I'm like, hey, can we have Micah play piano on this? And he's like, well, he'll have to be in the room with you. And I'm like, yeah, I know, that's fine. And he's like, all right, let me throw a mic up. And,
cool.
And that song, what you hear, is exactly how it was recorded. There is no. That is the livest of the live, and it's cool that it was this New Orleans inspired tune. And Micah, I talk about students of New Orleans music. Micah is one, and so he immediately dives right in and knows what I'm writing. And Dylan Napier, the drummer, too, and it's got that New Orleans one, and that's just how talented those guys are. So they're like, oh, it's like this New Orleans thing, let's do it, and it's like, yeah, it is, So very lucky.
No, that's
very lucky in that regard.
And I do think that you can feel that. Maybe that's part of the reason I like that song so much, is that you can feel that, like you're in the room listening to it. And I'm sure that also translates to you, especially when you think about recording it. If you ever listen to it again, you could really put yourself in there and know exactly what was going on around you. But there's albums that get put out that you can tell that they're recorded live. You get the instrument bleed, like you're saying, but you can really put yourself there, because there's towards the end of the song, there's some banter in the background, I think. It happens again in Titanic Thompson, right, where you guys yell towards the end of the song, or maybe it's just you that's yelling, but I think that gives a much better feel to the album, which the listeners appreciate.
Yeah, well, and two, I mean, like talking about earlier what it means when I'm in command of my craft, and what it means when I sit down to write something. I think that requires an understanding of the collaborative nature of music and trusting people to do their jobs. And my guy Drew, who records, he's the only person I'll record with, because he's the only recording engineer I met that concerns himself with the worlds that this song is taking place in.
That's cool.
And so, because you've picked up on all my songs are like characters and settings and situations, and I've in the past just met recording engineers that just set up the mics how they've learned to set them up and then press record, and they're just they're listening for the acoustic guitar, trying to capture the best sounding acoustic guitar, not like, well, does it sound like somebody smuggled in a guitar in a jailhouse? Like, are you listening? And Drew, when he engineers, he concerns himself with the world the song is taking place in. And so it's just instantly things work.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. The last thing I'll say about this album that I want to talk about, you've teased it a little bit about your next album that you're working on. Last thing I'll say about this album was the first time I put this on, it was a recommendation from a mutual friend, Logan Ledger, who said, hey, check this out. This is Dylan's new album. It just came out. And I listened to it. I didn't know who you were, and I didn't know your name off the top of my head. And I start playing. I'm like, this doesn't sound like a debut album. And when you listen to somebody's first album, usually the quality isn't great. Maybe they're having fun, maybe they're playing together, but doesn't, when you listen to an album that doesn't feel produced very well. This was produced really well, which the entire time adds to the experience of being in the room. You can hear, different members of the band. Your vocals sound really clear. So I think the whole thing was a nice package that you should be really happy with. And I'm hoping that people hear this and it gets some momentum, because people should be listening to it.
Well, yeah, man, that's high praise, and probably it's going to feed into my delusion that I in any way know what I'm doing. But I really feel like
just don't let around.
Us down. Yeah, well, that's it. Is with great delusion comes great responsibility, and I was fortunate to have the music career I did, where I worked with other talented artists, and I just had to show up and play guitar or piano, and I would write whatever songs I was writing, but there was no, it was just like a kid trying on clothes that didn't fit right. And then finally it all just worked. My life came together and my music came together in a way that, for this debut album, it's a complete thing I'm doing versus just picking the 11 best songs I think I've written and then paying people to play them. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, it also helps that you had a full band who plays together come in, right? As opposed to, let me grab that session person and, whatever it is.
Well, and yeah, and none of this would have happened without, you know, people like Margot and Jeremy and Jamie Davis and the whole band. You know, they were all pushing it forward and pushing it along. And
that's great.
They really got me on my feet. And Drew too was like, I'd known Drew for a number of years. But when we got a session or two under our belts, and he was like, hey dude, don't worry about the money necessarily. Let's get this thing done. And so I always say it takes a village to raise a Dillon, and it just really did. I mean, like, everybody just kind of came around before I even fully knew what was going on. Everybody else was really going out on a limb for me, and that. No,
it's great, and you can hear it. You can hear it from all the other band members. So what's next? What are you working on? You've teased that you're working on another record. What can we expect from you? Man,
I'm almost done with the writing for this next record, which is I'm really excited about. It's I mean, obviously every artist thinks it's their best work, but I really feel like I figured out something for these songs. And I mean, I've written a lot, but I think I'm at 7 or 8 of them now that like we're almost there, and we're going to start recording the new one soon. And it's broader in every sense of the term. It's just, you know, there's sort of on Now That It's All Over, I could probably, you know, there is a lot of that, you know, that, you know, guy punches himself is funny. So it's like, if it doesn't work out, it still works. You know, there's probably some subjects and stuff that I just naturally gravitated to tackling on this next record that are all in the same spirit of like, well, I've never really heard anything like that, but there's not so much sheepishness or like well, if this doesn't work out, it's more of like, I feel like I'm really attacking them as the writer I've always wanted to be, and I always like got drunk and said I was, you know, and so I'm really excited starting that. And I'll be what's the date today? It's a when what day is it?
21st, July 21st.
Today is the 21st. I don't know when this airs, but I know this Friday. Does this air today?
No, this will air Friday, the 23rd.
Oh, so in Media Land today, when this is airing, I'll be announcing a tour up from the southeast to the northeast. Gonna be touring with a good buddy. I don't know if so it'll be with Jeremy Ivy, my friend, fantastic songwriter. Margot's husband, just brilliant, like my main man. Like him and I talk writing all the time, and
awesome.
So we'll be announcing a tour together. I'll be flying, doing shows. I just put the order in for vinyl copies of Now That It's All Over. So I'll be having vinyl sometime this fall, per my most recent estimation. And what am I doing?
And at some point in there, squeezing in recording sessions.
Yeah. And I'm at that stage of the career where there's like a lot of really neat stuff on the horizon, but it's all still just me doing it. And so like there's like, I didn't even realize that this interview was like today, you know, until you sent the email last night. And then I was like, oh my God, I got it. Okay. I will get home, because I'm at the stage of my career where I still have a day job. I'm just starting to be really, really bad at my day job, you know, because like I got enough stuff going on that it's like, I'm not very employable right now. I'm the worst employee you'd ever want, you know, but that's why I picked a career. I work labor and construction. And so it's like, you're not going to find many guys dumb enough to still show up and do the stuff I'm doing. So it's like, well, he's a bum, but he showed up, you know, but I'm like, oh, I got to take off today. I got to do an interview. And it's just a bunch of construction guys, like, an interview for what, you know? And then so
you got to do is hang out with them to get some stories.
Oh, well, exactly. And I think that's why they keep me around too, though, is because I can make them laugh. And And yeah, I go back to that well a bunch with the construction dudes. But so I got the funny in between right now of, you know, some people will send me messages and be like, you know, who's your publicist, or how'd you get this Rolling Stone thing? And I mean, it's just like, dude, it's just me. And like, I'm getting like yelled at by my boss, like working construction, like the lowest person on the ladder, like, pick up the bricks, kid, come on, you know. And I'm getting these messages about like, you know, like I'm some sort of writer, you know. And so it's a really funny in between, and I know which world I want to be moving more into, but it's you know, right now it's a lot of 6 a.m. waking up in the morning, going to work, and then right until 3 a.m. at night. And then it's just like, man, you got to make the most of those 2.5 hours of sleep.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you taking the time, Dillon. We're looking forward to it. So you're going to have to keep me posted. Are you going to make it to Boston? That's where I am.
Yeah. Yeah, we will be.
Cool.
And it's another example of, like I've just said yes to it.
You're your own publicist and have to find what.
I have no idea where, or, you know, like, I mean, I know I'm flying out to the West Coast to do some festivals. I'm pretty sure there's no conflicting dates. So, but we will be in Boston. I'll let you know.
Cool. Sounds good, man. All right. I'm going to let Titanic Thompson take us out of here. We'll save that story for another time. That one's great. But thanks for taking the time. And we'll look forward to. You don't have a name yet for the new album, right? You're probably not going to announce that, so we won't put the cart before the horse there.
If I had a name, I would tell you the name, but I don't have a name yet.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right, thanks, brother.
Speaking of 5, he had 5 wives over the course of his career, but he was never much for staying at home. 5 times he disappeared. Every one of them ladies loved him though, and they'd be the first to say they never wanted a single thing till his dying day. And when his dying day did come, well, it didn't make the news. Gamblers don't get parades, that much I know is true.